Thank you for watching Bobby's Briefings. And I said, Lord, what do we want to talk about today? And he said, I want you to talk about divine adventure. Divine adventures. I'm telling you, a lot of times I speak to young people and they act like Christianity is boring. I want to tell you what. Now, religion is boring. But Christianity is not boring. Being a child of the King and a commission of God to go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, it's not boring. Now, I'm going to tell you some stories about divine adventures, things God called me and commissioned me into. So one day, all of this is documentable. It's not some yarn. It actually happened. Okay. One day I'm just waiting up on the Lord, and he said, Bobby, I want you to go to a certain country and preach the gospel. I said, okay, God, I'll go. And he said, where is it? He said, Mongolia. Where? Mongolia. I like to never found Mongolia. I got out the globe. I'm looking for Mongolia. I found it between China and Russia. I found it, Mongolia. All right. So I didn't know anything about Mongolia. I'd never heard of Mongolia myself. And so I looked and found it, got me an airplane ticket, and off we go to Mongolia to preach the gospel. Oh boy. I did a little research to find out what the temperature was, because I didn't want to show up in a t-shirt when I needed a trench coat. Oh my goodness, just to cut a lot of the stuff. I get to Mongolia. I don't have anybody there that's going to sponsor me in a crusade. I'm sent there because God said, go to Mongolia and preach the gospel. And so I told Rick Joyner about it. I said, God's sending me to Mongolia. I'm going to preach the gospel. I was doing a conference for Rick. And Rick gets up right before I'm leaving, and he says, Bobby's going to go to Mongolia on a mission trip. Ask God to give you a word for him. If he does, just give it to him as he goes out. Stuff it in his pocket. Because I was headed back to the hotel because I was going to have to get up and catch a plane early. And boy, people was giving all kind of, thus saith God and thee, my son, da, 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 all of that. And anyway, so I get there and I got a wad of paper in my pocket that people had wrote down stuff. And so I threw it all on the bed. I'm looking through there to see if anything will catch my spirit. And all of a sudden something did. It said, be careful where you put your right foot. Be careful where you put your right foot. Okay, I got that. And so we go to Mongolia. I end up in the Gobi Desert, 60 below zero, in a tent. What? I end up in the Gobi Desert, 60 below zero, in a tent. I had on clothes. I tied a wool underwear around my head. I like to froze to death. Good gracious. Out there in the middle of the Gobi Desert. And at that time, they had never registered a single Christian in Mongolia. And so there I am. I said, God, why have you brought me here? He said, because you're going to climb that mountain and you're going to stand there and you're going to curse and tear down a principality. I said, okay, I'm going to climb that mountain and I'm going to curse and tear down a principality. He said, that's correct. And I got to feeling a little inadequate. You know what I mean? And the Lord said, no, go. I have sent you and I'll be with you. That's it. Joshua 1:9, be bold, be brave, be very courageous. Go do what you're called to do because you're not going by yourself. So it's a big old tall mountain. So I thought, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just go over there and I'll rent me a Russian helicopter. They had some helicopters there, and I'll get them to helicopter me up to that mountain and I'll save a lot of steps. I get there to get the Russian helicopter and I looked at it. Oh Lord, a pile of junk. The rotor was rusted too and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, you couldn't tie me on that helicopter. Anyway, here I go, journeying up the hill. I get about halfway up the mountain and the oxygen is bad and I'm dragging my feet, man. It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough, honestly, you know. And I'm way up there and I mean, it's a way down there. And so I thought I'm going to sit on a rock and rest a minute because I'm really tired. And so I'm looking for a big boulder where I could sit down to catch my breath. Okay, and I look, there's one. So I reached my right foot out to touch it, and Just as I've reached my right foot out, guess what appeared back in my spirit? Be careful where you put your right foot. And I almost blew it away. I almost said, well, that couldn't be talking about me. Then I thought, this is my right foot and I'm watching where I'm putting it. So I tapped that rock with my toe. When I tapped that rock with my toe, it turned loose from the mountain. You never heard such a roar and a rumbling as rocks and boulders went crashing down hundreds of feet below where I was. I'm going, glory to God. Thank God for somebody that said, be careful where you see. We need one another. But anyway, long story short, in the Gobi Desert, 60 below zero, and we got to preach the gospel. They had never really heard the gospel, and God began to do miracles. I mean, wonderful miracles, and it's a pretty hot spot right now. I know one of them missionary took his whole band to the Gobi Desert and did a concert for God in the Gobi Desert. But as far as we can tell, we were there when the first convert got converted to Jesus Christ. But we had a great time, wonderful time. I'm telling you, you talk about cold. We were in a tent made out of horsehair, and they cooked. They cooked in the tent with horse manure. That was their charcoal, was horse pellets. And the little Mongolian mama, she was not just a little bitty thing, but she liked me because I was there to help them. And the little children, they just it was pretty awesome and pretty crazy. But we got there, got the gospel preached, and I left them a book and Young's biblical translation, and they built a seminary out of that one book. And there's Christians over there now, and it's pretty wild what had happened when the Russians left and the communists left. The Mongols would leave the desert and come into the towns, and they didn't know anything about hotels. They'd take the furniture out of the hotels and break it up out in the parking lot and build them a fire, and they'd put their animals in the hotels. It was kind of reversed a little bit, but that's what it means, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And so that was one of my invitations. I got another invitation if you want to hear about it, because I'm counteracting that thing that Christianity is boring. Not if you go with Bobby Conner, it's not boring. I'll guarantee you that. It's not. So anyway, the Lord said, I want you to go to and do a crusade in the Philippines. I said, okay, I'm going to the Philippines and I'm going to do a crusade. I thought he meant crusade like soccer stadium, sports event. Nope, he meant a crusade like Indiana Jones. Good Lord, I get to the Philippines and they put me on a helicopter. That's a helicopter. Yeah, I don't charge extra for sound effects. Anyway, a helicopter flew out to an island out there, landed, and there I get off the helicopter, and I'm going to be there 14 days and 14 nights. And I'm out in the middle of a jungle on a little bitty pad no bigger than my office room here. And helicopter leaves. And I thought, oh man. And they were two people there. And the Lord said, I want you to preach. I said, to who? And it was these two people. And they had one little car battery or looked like off a motorcycle. And they put a wire to it and turned it on one little bitty light. A little bitty light lit up. And the Lord said, preach. I said, okay. So I stood there and preached in the middle of this jungle, preaching about Jesus. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever... And when I gave the invitation, I was shocked. I bowed my head. As far as I knew, there was two people there, and I asked people to come to receive Jesus. I bowed my head, and I opened my eyes, and up to my knees were AK-47s, these automatic war guns, and they were in a full-blown revolution. Full-blown revolution. And there I am, going to be 14 days and 14 nights. Oh my goodness. We had some deals, boy, but we saw the dead raised. Yes, we did. Saw miracles happen. Saw people damming up volcano streams and having baptismal services. Listen, we have not because we ask not. We got in there and had a time. Okay, now here we go. Come with me in this jungle in one of the islands there offside the Philippines. Where I'm there. I don't speak any Filipinos or whatever they call it. I don't know, but me and the other guy, two of us, was walking down a trail, and a guy jumps out and sticks an AK-47 in my back. Goes, I said, what did he say? He said, follow him. I said, we're following him. And so help me, this is all true. We get there to a mountainside, and there's a big mountainside, and it had vines and parts of trees growing, and they pulled that aside, and it was a door, and I go into a mountain. I'm telling you, I can feel it while I'm sitting here trying to tell the story. They pulled back the vines and stuff and go in there, and it's a mountain. It's a room in this mountain, and I look, and up against the walls are these ground-to-air missiles like you shoot down planes, and all kind of weapons and armory, and the whole floor is filled with these warriors, and they're sitting cross-legged like this. And this guy that's speaking to one of the interpreters, he's jabbering and speaking. I said, what is he saying? He says, here's what he's saying. He said, they want you to stand here and say to them what you're saying to these other people that make their face light up. I go, I can do that. So we preach the gospel in there with these warriors about Jesus, for God so loved the world, and there's an eternity. And guess what happened? These soldiers started getting saved. And one man said, I've waited all my life to hear this message. And so I'm just trying to tell you, Christianity is not boring. Now, man-made, initiative of religion at some kind can be boring, but not Jesus. He's active, and it's exciting. In that situation there, this is all true. They put me in a hut, and there was a maniac in the bottom of the hut, and we're in the middle of a jungle, and it's just a bamboo bungalow kind of thing. Crazy, man. I get up there, and the guy down below is a maniac. He's got a piece of ear and a piece of finger in a sack of oil around his neck. He was a killer. And there's some pigs down there too. And so I get up there, and I'm up about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. And there's one coffee can there with a rag running up through it, and it was on fire. And that was my light. And I'm going to be there 14 days and 14 nights. So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to have to stay awake. Because if I go to sleep, this maniac down there, he'll have 2 ears and 4 fingers, in a sack around his neck. And so I said, I'll just stay awake. And the Lord spoke to me and said, Bobby, you're going to stay awake 14 days and 14 nights? And then I realized how absurd that was. And I said, no, I don't guess I will. And I blew the light out. It got so dark in there, the demons were whirling around, sounded like an attic fan. And so help me God, I slept like a baby. See, God's either who he says he is, or it's all a joke. And he said, I'll lay you down, your sleep will be sweet. But anyway, we had a time. But that was my journey to Mongolia. And so here's what I'm trying to say to you. Don't let anybody say, well, Christianity is boring. It's not. And I'm telling you, God wants to change the world, and he'll do it through men and women who say, here I am, send me. And I tell you what, if God sends you, there'll be a purpose and a plan and power there to meet you. So this is Bobby Connor, the Eagles View Ministry, just trying to tell you some of the stories. I've got some. Oh my goodness. Can I give you one more? Yes, Bobby. I was going to preach, and I had on me a nice kind of a suit and a tie. And I was driving by, and I was in Texas at that time, and I drove by Dairy Queen, and it said Belt Buster. That's a hamburger they just came out with. And a guy like me can't hardly turn down a Belt Buster. So I turned my blinker on, and I turned into Dairy Queen. So I parked out in the parking lot because I didn't want to go through the drive-thru because there's a bunch of cars. And so I get out of my vehicle, and I'm starting in there to get me a Belt Buster, and a motorcycle guy comes roaring in, right by me. And big old guy, he had on a motorcycle jacket for it, and had "Go to Hell" and "How to Get There" tattooed on him. And I gave him a little tract out of my pocket. It said, I asked because I care, and it was about salvation, about getting people saved. So I first of all, I said, man, that's a good looking bike. And he says, you like bikes? I go, yeah, I do. But anyway, I gave him this tract, and I start in there, and I come back out, and there he is. He's about half mad. He said, you don't talk to me? I said, yeah, I will. And he said, and so I talked to him, and he said, "You want to ride this bike?" I said, "Yes." Now, I don't recommend this. I threw my leg over the bike. Boom! We took off down Prairieville Street in Athens, Texas. We got to the first light that turns to go to the junior college. He locked it up in a slide and did a burnout and brought us back to the Dairy Queen. I'd lost my appetite, let me tell you that. But I'd laid hands on him, man. His old black hair blowing back my face. I had him, man. Anyway, he said, "Would you go with me?" I said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "We're out here near the airport. They had broken into a barn, stole a jukebox, and had it plugged in." I'll never forget the feeling I felt when I walked in there. There's hay and stuff, and here's this motorcycle gang, wild drug deals, and there they are laying in the hay like rats, honestly. And the guy that I just rode out there on, that I talked to about Jesus, he walks over there and kicks the plug out of the wall where the music was, and it goes like this. And boy, they all, what the blank, blank, blank. And so this guy says, "I want you to listen to this man. He's got something to tell us." And I stood there in a barn and preached the gospel. And these big old boys, these big old men, they'd come forward and give their heart to Christ. Big old crocodile tears run down their face like this. Oh boy. And then right at the end of it, the little old gal, just a short thing and hostile, she walks right up to me, cleared her throat, and spit in my face. I thought, I'll just slap her to Wednesday. And the Lord said, "Nope, you've got to love her also." But anyway, the guy that was leading the motorcycle gang, he goes back down to Florida, is reconciled with his family, takes his children back up, and all because of a belt buster. No, Jesus changed his life, and he started a youth movement and had a great time. But what I'm trying to say to us, don't you let anybody tell you that Christianity is boring. It's not. It's not. Join the crew, and I'll tell you, you'll find yourself on an adventure, because you'll never be by yourself. He'll be with you. Be bold, be brave, be very courageous. Go do what you're called to do, because you're not going by yourself. The Lord, mighty in battle, is going with you. So this is Bobby Connor. God bless you. Thank you for taking so long to watch Bobby's briefings.